This is my musical instrument tier list, and it's going to be ranked in order based on three main factors. The first one is how difficult the instrument is to learn, so kind of learning curve of the instrument. The second factor is the demand for it professionally. So both in a performance sense and in a teaching sense, this channel is primarily aimed at helping musicians generate more freedom and income through online coaching. So we'll look at the viability of each for that. And the third factor, which is going to be the most heavily weighted factor, is just how cool I think the instrument is and how cool it sounds. I'm sure you'll see some of my biases come out with that. So to get started, we'll start off with trombone. Trombone's a bit of a staple instrument for sure. You know, it's relatively beginner friendly. And there's a decent skill ceiling on trombone, obviously with the slide mechanic and that sort of thing. There's demand across the board, you know, classical and contemporary world, you know, you'll never be short of gigs and students. However, the coolness factor of trombone isn't quite there for me. It kind of knocks it down a peg. So I think it belongs in C tier. Next up, we got ukulele. Look, ukulele is sort of a little bit of a sidekick instrument, right? It's not something that's going to necessarily be your main instrument. It's beginner friendly, kind of gets people playing, that sort of thing. But it's, in terms of demand, you know, it's not quite there. It's always going to be sort of an accessory type thing, you know, to a guitarist. You might need to learn a bit of a ukulele if you're playing like a theater show or something like that. Or, you know, it has its place, but it's not super popular. And I think the coolness factor of ukulele is not really quite there. It's a bit of a sidekick instrument. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in D tier. Flute is an extremely beginner-friendly instrument, no doubt. It's the easiest to get started on out of all of the woodwinds, I would say. And there's definitely big demand for it in the classical world. You'll never be short of students if you're teaching flute. There's also been this kind of resurgence of flute in terms of coolness with this sort of like new wave, jazz, pop, dance thing that's kind of come back. So I think that bumps it up a peg for sure, and it belongs in B tier. Okay, now we got bagpipes. Look, to be honest, I don't really care about the learning curve of bagpipes because I don't think we need any more bagpipes in the world. And the demand for it outside of Scotland is pretty thin. If you're thinking about getting into teaching bagpipes, please don't, because they sound horrendous and I think they belong in the bin. Classical guitar. Look, now, there's obviously a big demand for guitar. Everybody loves guitar. Everybody loves getting started on it. However, classical guitar is a little bit more niche. You know, it's obviously popular, but not quite as popular as like electric guitar, but it's cool. I just think, you know, those classical styles, more like finger picking styles, that sort of thing. You'll never be short of students as a classical guitarist, that's for sure. The coolness factor, look, it is really, really cool, I will say, but I think it belongs in B tier. Double bass. Double bass is by far the most difficult instrument to learn and play. Massive skill curve on a double bass. Just the sheer physicality of it. Obviously, there is demand in the classical world. Huge demand in the jazz world, right? It's really kind of the backbone of the jazz sound. Double bass is by far, specifically jazz double bass, I wouldn't necessarily say it about classical, but it's by far the coolest, one of the coolest instruments to play. I love the sound of double bass. And for that reason, I'm going to put it in A tier. Next up, we have drumline. Marching band, snare, percussion, that sort of thing. Absolutely awesome. Okay, I love this stuff. It's such a cool sound. It's quite deep as well. You know, there's a real institution for it, especially in the United States. Outside the States, I wouldn't say there's necessarily the demand for it, but if you're a teacher and you're looking to get into coaching this, then there is a big market for it, obviously, in the States. Also, the movie Drumline is one of the greatest movies of all time. I think it's pretty cool. I think Drumline is really cool, and I think it bumps it up to B tier. All right, now we have French horn. Look, French horn it's a cool instrument. I'll say it's nice. It's more of a nice to have than a need to have. You know what I mean? I mean, it's in there. It's in with the orchestra, but not like always. And if you're a French horn player, you're probably going to have to be dipping your toes in some other instruments as well, like a little bit of tuba, you know, that sort of thing. But you can main French horn. You can have it as your primary instrument, no doubt. For me, though, the coolness factor of French horn isn't quite there, even though it is a nice sounding instrument, I will say, but it's about on par with trombone for me in C tier. Okay, cello. I actually had a few cello lessons when I was little. I could never quite get my hands around it. I will say any of the string instruments, they do have a pretty steep learning curve. you're going to sound bad for like quite a while. But once you can get over that hump, cello is really a beautiful instrument, and it really is the backbone of so many different classical arrangements, like obviously string quartet, orchestras. It's in there. It's in the mix. You know what I'm saying? I think cello is really cool. I think it's, as far as coolness factor of the string instruments, it's definitely up there. And it puts it in B tier for me with the cello. Okay, bassoon. Bassoon's a funny one because obviously of the double reed woodwinds, they're generally a little bit harder to learn, a little bit harder to master. Bassoon is super niche, right? It's a pretty niche instrument. You don't see it everywhere. You obviously do see it in orchestra and classical arrangements. Randomly though, back in the day, I used to play in this band in Melbourne that was kind of like a porno funk 80s revival band, and there was a bassoonist, and it kind of worked. So for that reason, I actually think like bassoon's kind of cool. The sound, like the low end on a bassoon, I think really adds to the vibe of bassoon. And I'm going to put it in B tier. I think it belongs in B tier. All right, the kazoo is not really an instrument. Okay, it's a toy. Nobody cares about kazoo. I think the skill curve on a kazoo is like non-existent. They sound terrible. You buy a kazoo like you buy a pack of gum at the supermarket, like while you're buying the real stuff at the music store. So for that reason, I think it belongs in the bin. Next up is recorder. Look, recorder is definitely it's a gateway instrument to like real instruments. Do you know what I mean? You get started on recorder. If you're teaching recorder, it's most likely going to be like in a music school teaching kids. It definitely has its place. I will say that. It's not something that, I don't know how many career recordists there are in the world. It's kind of only so far you can take a recorder, you know what I mean? You're going to kind of go on to bigger and better things, but it doesn't quite belong in the bin. I think it's got its place, so I'm going to put it in D tier. Harp is a funny one. Harp's a funny one because it's so niche, right? Like there's almost no demand for it in some sense. It's relatively easy to learn harp, because everything's kind of laid out for you. You don't have to worry about kind of intonation and stuff like that. Difficult to master for sure. I feel like the demand is going to be, if you're a harpist, you're going to have like no gigs for ages, and then you're going to do either an orchestral thing or playing at some like multi-millionaires party, so there's kind of some viability there. But harp's a weird one to place, and for me, I don't know, it's a little bit too niche. It's not super versatile. I'm going to put it in C tier. Okay, banjo. Make up your mind. Are you a drum? Are you a guitar? What's going on? I don't really get it. I don't think banjo sounds that good. I mean, look, it's niche. There is demand for it to some extent, but it is, again, it falls into that category of like the sidekick instruments. Like, I don't know how many people whose main instrument is banjo. It's more of an accessory, and it's pretty niche. There's only a handful of genres where it's going to be useful. Some kind of on the side theater stuff where it comes up as well, but it sort of belongs in the same category as ukulele for me in D tier. Okay, viola. Obviously, there is a huge demand for viola in the classical world. It's really a staple of like, string quartets and orchestras and all that stuff. You see it everywhere. Big demand. That skill curve's still there on the string instruments. It's a really beautiful instrument. I think it's a cool one. A little bit more interesting timbre and texture than a violin, sorry to say, but I think it's cool. In terms of where to place it, look, I got to be careful here. My mom is a violist, so I think she'd be sad if I put it any lower than B tier, but I think that's where it belongs. I think viola is a really just strong like midfield instrument. Orchestral percussion. Now, if you're playing orchestral percussion, you're going to be have to be quite versatile, right? You're going to have to learn a few different things. This probably includes like a bit of xylophone, marimba, that sort of thing, which I haven't included here, but kind of put it under this category. Big demand in the classical world, obviously. Coolness factor though, I don't think is quite there. Like I definitely don't think it's as cool as like Drumline, for instance. But very necessary instrument, obviously, and a big part of that orchestral sound. So we'll put classical percussion in C tier. Okay, oboe, definitely another interesting one with the double reed instrument. You're going to have a bit more of your time in the spotlight, playing a few melodies, that sort of thing. Difficult to learn, and also like a weirdly high mortality rate. I think something to do with the double reed and the pressure in the brain, all that kind of stuff. So you got to be careful with this one. It's not quite as cool as bassoon for me, so I'm going to drop it down into C tier. Next up, we got this pan drum, steel drum thing. I hate this thing. I don't know what it is about it, that there's something about this sound that just really triggers me. It's a bit of a gimmick instrument, you know, it's kind of locked into one key. You got to have a bunch of them if you want them to actually be useful. And it's just kind of like, I don't know, it's like, it's not even really a gateway instrument. It's a bit of a gimmick for me. You know, you play it for 5 minutes and you know, that's about how long it takes to get good at it. So for me, this thing belongs in the bin. Clarinet. I started on clarinet really early, actually. It was one of my first instruments, but I did upgrade later on to something better. Look, clarinet's very beginner friendly, obviously gets you started. Big staple in the classical world. You know, there's lots of demand for clarinetists, lots of demand for students, you know, wanting to learn it. It's going to be more focused in the kind of early education, I think, because people that learn clarinet often do change to something else, but it's a sweet instrument nonetheless. And for me, it's definitely better than oboe, so I think it belongs in B tier. Okay, harmonica. Harmonica is something that, again, it's a bit of a psychic instrument. It's a little bit, you know, it's not really going to be something that is going to be your primary instrument. You kind of learn it on the side of guitar or, you know, piano, something like that. So I don't know how much demand there is. You know, I don't know any career harmonicists. I don't know. For me, it's just like, it's kind of annoying too. You got to have a bunch of them, you know, to be able to play in different keys and that sort of thing. So I don't know. Harmonica belongs in D tier for me. Electric bass. Okay, electric bass, huge demand, obviously. Everybody wants to learn electric bass. Everybody loves electric bass. It is very beginner friendly, you know, there's only 4 strings, you know what I'm saying? It's pretty straightforward. Easy to learn, difficult to master for sure. Big demand. The coolness factor of electric bass, I think, skyrockets it to it's an S tier instrument just across the board, right? Great for getting started, great for mastering, and it's just, you just look cool with the bass, you know what I mean? You just look cool. I'm really into it, but it's our first S tier instrument. Okay, now we got saxophone. Saxophone, obviously very popular woodwind instrument. Big demand both in the classical and the jazz world as well, obviously. The coolness factor of saxophone, I think, definitely makes it the big boy of the woodwinds. Not so much in classical though. I think the coolness factor isn't there in classical, but it is in jazz for sure. Improvisation, that sort of thing. It's like such an iconic part of that sound, which I think puts it up into A tier for me. All right, Latin percussion. So here I'm talking about like congas, bongos, that sort of thing. Cuban music, Brazilian music. Awesome. Absolutely awesome. Big demand across the board. You can be like a career percussionist. Obviously, everybody loves percussion. It just adds so much vibe, you know, to like almost any style, but particularly congas too. There is a really deep like learning curve with congas, and you can get really good at it for sure. I've dabbled in it a bit myself, and it's very difficult to learn and to master. But I just love this. I love Cuban music and Brazilian music and that sort of thing. So I think this puts it up in B tier for me. Okay, mandolin. Mandolin is an interesting one because, again, it's not quite a mainstay instrument. It's not necessarily something you're going to be primarily a mandolin player. It's more of a sidekick instrument as well, but I think it's a bit cooler than these others, you know? It's definitely cooler than banjo, that's for sure. There is a bit of scope with mandolin, and, you know, especially it's much more popular now in like the theater world, that sort of thing. Yeah, there is depth to mandolin as well, depth to mandolin playing, I would say, more so than these other ones here. So I'm going to put it in C tier. Piano, obviously, massive demand for piano. Okay, it's extremely beginner friendly, massive skill curve. Okay, massive demand across the board, all styles, all genres. Everybody loves piano. I love the sound of acoustic piano. I think it's one of the best instruments in existence. Again, you're never going to have any shortage of students. And for me, piano is definitely an A tier instrument. Maybe even, piano is definitely S tier. Piano is an S tier instrument. Even if it's not your main instrument, you're probably going to play a little bit of piano. So happy to put it in S tier there. Following piano as well, I've got actually synth here, like keyboard, synthesizers as its own category, because interestingly enough, I think it's not talked about enough, the kind of depth there is of knowledge and kind of getting good at these different instruments. And obviously there's a massive demand for it in the contemporary world, and a big space for someone who is able to master it, because there is a massive skill curve with kind of understanding how these things work. So for me, you know, obviously similar skill set to piano and that sort of thing, but solidly B tier. I mean, it's just awesome. I love synths. I love different sounds that they make. and just really, really awesome all around. Okay, now I've got vocals here. Look, obviously there's going to be people watching who are like, but my voice is my instrument. And of course it is. So we're going to put it here. Look, everybody, huge demand. Everybody sings, or everybody thinks they can sing. So you're never going to have any shortage of students. You're never going to have shortage of gigs. That's for sure. There's always a demand for singers or good singers. Coolness factor is there for sure, but look, I can't bring myself to say it's as cool as electric bass, but it's definitely up there. It's definitely an A tier instrument singing for me. Drums across the board, if we go through the three factors, okay, they're easy to learn, extremely difficult to master. So big skill ceiling, massive opportunity for playing, right? You're always going to have work. Everybody needs a drummer. You're always going to have students, that's for sure. Coolness factor is through the roof. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, but listen, drums are the most kinetic instrument, you know, the most physical. Everybody loves a drummer, you know what I'm saying? So for me, drums can't go anywhere else other than S tier. All right, violin. Look, violin is definitely number one of all the strings. It's the king, the queen of the string instruments. Like I said, though, big skill curve. I remember my mum being a string player growing up and listening to beginners playing violin, like, as my mum doing private teaching at home. And it was tough. It was tough listening to that. I don't know how many times I had to listen to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, sounding awful. But listen, massive demand. Obviously, violin is an awesome instrument across the board, classical world. You're never going to be short of gigs. You're never going to be short of students. So it's an A tier instrument for me as well. Next up, we have trumpet. Look, trumpet, again, it's kind of the same deal, but with the brass, right? It's the big boy brass instrument. The lead, you know, very sure of itself. But yeah, look, big demand across the board, contemporary and classical world. Obviously belongs in the B tier for me with that one. Penultimate instrument here is electric guitar. Look, I mean, there's just no denying electric guitar. Big demand, okay, big skill curve. Everybody loves electric guitar. It is one of the coolest instruments to play, no doubt. I think if there was like a bit of a hierarchy here with the S tier, I think drums would pip electric guitar just a little bit, but electric guitar, no doubt, obviously belongs in the S tier. It is one of the greatest instruments. Lastly, we have accordion. Accordion's an interesting one. It's sort of a bit of an extension of piano being the primary skill, but with this sort of lung component, I guess. I don't know what you call it. Accordion's pretty cool for me. It definitely bumps it up a little bit. There's demand for it, you know. But if you're a teacher, you know, it's going to probably be difficult to be primarily an accordion teacher. It's something you'll have to do as well as teaching piano, which I think solidly puts it in C tier. So there you have it. That's my tier list. I'm sure you have something to say about it. So please drop it in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.